so he got banned from Twitter,
A
but
lot of people did.
overall he's being deplatformed,
Yeah,
right? So what are your thoughts? What are you thinking with the banning of Twitter and the deplatforming that he's
it's
experiencing?
5 years too late. It's like 5 years too late. Twitter was doing it because they're trying to avoid more violence, and I get it. And everybody followed suit. It was a strong message to do it all together. But look, it's 5 years too late. He said on Twitter, when the looting starts, the shooting starts. That's violence. That's inciting violence right there. So it's just too late. But I do think people have to understand what the First Amendment means. Twitter is just a business. They could kick anybody off. He violated the terms over and over again. This isn't silencing the president. He could turn on the TV right now and be on every single station in the world. So let's just relax with that kind of rhetoric. But look, this was coming. I made a prediction last week that it was coming in February. So this was just a matter of time. So it's justified, and Parler's gone now too. So as far as I'm concerned, this is. And one of my predictions last week was also about Twitter and Facebook and Google moving forward. This is definitely going to be in the news for a foreseeable future.
Right, and one of the things I think is interesting is, like you said, first and foremost, this is no kind of First Amendment
Right.
violation. These are private companies. And, as someone pointed out, he's the president of the United States. And the reality is if he really wants a voice, he can walk right into that press briefing room and take questions. He can go ahead and he if he were to call all the networks and say, I want airtime now, they might give him to him, they might not, but there'd be cameras in the room and his message would or could get out,
Yeah.
right? Um, but the reality is that they have the ability to go ahead and they're private businesses, and
Yeah.
if their bottom line suffer. But I do think the most fascinating thing is, so think about it. So Twitter took them out, Facebook took them out, Facebook extended to Instagram, Snapchat took them out, Shopify, others. But
Amazon.
I think that Amazon. But I think the most interesting piece though was the Parlor, because what Parler did was, knowing that this is a platform that is being utilized to not only give Trump a platform, but has been, the far right uses it for organizing and everything else. The reality is that um, Google and Apple basically saying, hey, if you don't clean up your act or because of what you put out there, we're not going to make you guys available in our particular stores. And then what happened just before we started recording tonight, where Amazon basically said, oh, yeah, you use our servers, Parlor, no more. Basically, they're saying to people, if your business model gives Trump a platform, or and the far right, these hate mongers, these white supremacists, a platform, we are not going to do business with you. That I didn't see that happening. Everybody thought, oh, just go to Parlor. But you and I had everything else. But as of Thursday, we knew that he might get kicked off and go to Parlor. But did you have the fact that Apple, Google, and Amazon would basically go ahead and say, you know what, we're not even going to provide the business support of Parlor because of what's going on in Parlor? Did you see that coming?
I did because I disagree with what you're saying in the sense that it's not a business decision. It's they're threatening to behead Mike Pence on Parler. That's a crime. I think I don't know his name, or he or she, Lynn Wood or whoever that is that keeps trending on Twitter. They're saying on Parler that Mike Pence is going to get beheaded first on January 17th. That's not a First Amendment thing. That's not a business issue. That's a crime. And so Amazon, Google, and Facebook and Twitter, they're accomplices in that crime on some level, right? Because they're allowing this organization to happen on your platform. Remember, Twitter really got famous for the Arab Spring in 2011, how people were organizing to protest in the Middle East. This is the opposite of that. They're organizing to cause violence to the United States government, to the citizens, to police officers. So I don't think it's a business decision. They're looking at it like they're using our app to cause violence, and I know that happens on
Right.
some level, but
But it could be a business decision, one, from the standpoint of their legal liability. I mean, one, that you would hope to think that it is, to your point, that moral obligation that they have, but they also potentially open themselves up to legal exposure, right? And in the case of probably not so much Twitter, Facebook, Amazon, Google, Apple, But in some of these smaller platforms who are trying to, whether it's getting seed investors, who are trying to get advertising dollars, who are not too big to fail, they can't afford to have that either. So I agree with you that there is a moral component, and don't forget, we heard that with Twitter, there was a lot of employees that pulled Jack aside and said, you gotta, take him down. But the reality is I think that there are also some hardcore business considerations because you don't want to be in business with that. But the last thing I'll say on this, which I think is fascinating, and I said it earlier this week on Twitter, is the worst part about Trump getting deplatformed, and I think it speaks very poorly of our country, is the fact that you have a president of the United States that is can't follow the terms of service. You and I have no love for Bush. We have no love for whatever the next Republican is. But we would have never ever seen Bush deplatform because Bush had enough common sense, right? So the reality is I think one of the most appalling things about this week is the Trump deplatforming. But it's not the fact that he got deplatformed, but that we actually had a chief executive of this country who was so immature, so evil, so immoral that these companies were forced to deplatform. That's where the problem is. Not that they did it, but the fact that he put them in a position where they had to do it.